Welcome back to Writing Done Right. Well, today we are going to talk about contrasting writing fiction versus writing nonfiction. What are the various considerations and other things that you run into on each of these formats? Thanks for making it back to the video. I am Tom Morosky. I'm an author and a technology consultant, and today we are going to have a look at writing fiction versus writing nonfiction. If you want to make sure you get all of your videos in your feed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and go ahead and turn on those notifications. So today we're going to look at writing fiction versus writing nonfiction. I tend to write more nonfiction, but I have been branching out and I have my first novel out as well. And I gotta say, writing both of them is absolutely rewarding. If you're looking at getting into writing, which one do you want to do? It kind of depends on what you are. I'm probably personally more wired into the nonfiction, but I actually really enjoyed writing the fiction as well. What are your differences? First, let's go ahead and as I'm doing this, I don't actually have a lot of notes, so be a longer, rambly video, but hey, that's how I always roll anyway, right? We're going to be comparing and contrasting I Am Not Amused, which is my book on media entertainment and the Christian, and we will look at Synaptergy, a science fiction novel about modern technology and the implications therein. So these are the two things that we are going to be looking at. And I'm just going to keep these books in front of me as pointed reminders about the various advantages. Let's go and talk about nonfiction first, because this is where I have most of my experience writing. So in a nonfiction book, one of the biggest challenges you have is structural organization and making sure you have your facts right. In other words, you need to make sure if you're approaching a nonfiction book, you need to make sure it is genuinely nonfiction. In other words, your data is accurate. Everything that you have to have in there needs to be as confirmably true as conceivably possible. I have a fun story that I've told before. It's worth telling every time I do a video like this, because writing in the Christian arena, particularly writing a book on media entertainment, there's a whole lot of people who take this approach that just says, rock and roll music, it's of the devil, and to the devil it can go, and then you pretty much leave it there. And then what happens is a whole lot of resources keep spreading around, like references keep spreading around, and everyone looks at these references and quotes and confirms these references, and I don't think anyone's ever gone back and looked at them. So there's a famous musician that many people attribute with being a Satanist, and he is quoted as saying, there is some other force out there was controlling us, and I hope it's not the devil. And everybody keeps on talking about this reference. Well, I actually spent 2 years while I was writing this book. I spent 2 years tracking down that reference. And when I finally got it, I spent way too much money on this copy of this magazine from like 1978. Get the magazine in, flip open to the page that every Christian website out there quotes as being this page, to find it's nothing but the latter part of an article from a Tom Petty article, which is not the Satanist I was talking about, and a guitar ad over most of the page. Like, yeah, nobody verified this reference. They just kind of all ran with it, I guess. And so I ended up throwing that statement out of the book because, hey, I was not actually able to do it. But that's the type of dedication you need to be able to do. So I have 99 references in this, and I had to make sure that I was accurate to all 99 references, because if anything was not accurate, that could render the book as being kind of, it would render the book as being too biased or too not accurate. And when you have a nonfiction book that's not accurate, that's a problem. And by the way, I then went to the source and read the autobiography of that particular Satanist musician to find out he's not a Satanist at all. They went into the studio, they recorded their stuff. Literally, it was the marketing guys who threw all the Satan type stuff into their approach. And it made them a lot of money, so they just kept doing it. I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying, no, the guy's not worshiping the devil off clock. There are musicians in here that do worship the devil off the clock, and I talked about some of them as well. And I read their autobiographies too. I confirmed it through reading their autobiographies. That was a very dark year or 4. But anyway, when you're doing nonfiction, you do have to make sure you have your facts. And then when your facts are down, then you need to organize your facts. You have to put things down into a structural order that makes sense to your reader. So what I did with this particular book is I wanted to make it as personal as I could. So I started this book, I Am Not Amused, with a testimony. And as I started this testimony book, I kind of talked about my experience growing up, not being in a form of religious system and having access to an unfettered amount of entertainment of all ways, shapes, forms, or whatever. And so I started with a little bit of a testimony, and then the first 2 things that I did is, rather than going right into the Christian view of it, where almost every book just goes right into there, throws out the baby with the bathwater, and declares everything that's not horrible praise and worship Christian music as being of the devil. Okay? I did not want to take that approach. I wanted to give it the respectability. So I started and asked a couple questions. Number 1 question I asked is, does media entertainment affect us? And I wanted to hear from the musicians, from the artists, from the directors themselves. So we have several references, direct quotes, and statements from the individual people that confirmed, yes, media entertainment does have an impact on our life. Okay, now that we've answered that, not from the biblical or Christian view, but from the secular world's view, we answered that question. The next question I wanted to ask is, what is the message they're giving us? So I looked at 3 popular artists. I analyzed the statements from their own words, their own books, their own interviews, and then we drew in some other references as well from other songs, from other points of view, just other generic things in addition to the 3 highlights. At that point in time, then I said, well, now, since this is a Christian book, how do we respond? And so we walked through, the rest of the book is mostly based on your Christian viewpoints, where we talked about how does the Bible lay out for us how we should walk? Does it? Yes or no? The answer is yes. And then how does it do that? So we had an observing the guardrails. So excellent. Now that we know that the Bible says we should watch what we do and that gives us the guardrails, the next thing we wanted to do is see how does media entertainment line up with those guardrails. But before we got there, media can be addictive. So I actually had an entire chapter on breaking the power of addictions in media entertainment. And then we got into the nuances of analyzing things. Everything had to be factual from the beginning to the end. That is the approach I took in writing nonfiction. If you are interested in this book, I Am Not Amused. You can find that anywhere where books are sold. Number 2, let's go ahead and talk about writing fiction. Writing fiction does carry with it some extra challenges. One of the things you have to do is you have to be truthful and factual to your individual story. In other words, you're creating a world. And when you create a world out of nothing, you have to make sure you keep it straight. And so you want to have vast details. Who is connected to whom? How are individuals connected? What orientation is the house? If my character has sun shining in his eyes, what direction is he going to be looking at in the sky? These are all the types of things you want to keep in mind, those minute details, because if you get these little details wrong, it breaks the credibility of your story. So with this, when you're writing fiction, the advantage of it is more based on your imagination. You can do with it literally anything you want, so long as you keep the story consistent with what is going on inside of your own mind, inside of your own approach. So I can't be changing every aspect of the character every few pages. That gets annoying and it breaks the story, and it basically is not really factual. But once I have established my world, I have the total freedom to make anybody move inside that world in any way that I want them to move. Which means I can use the story in the world to simply entertain, or I can use it to make a point, or I can use it to say there is a challenge here we as a society should be thinking about, because media does have powerful impacts. And when I wrote the book Synaptergy here, I wrote this book because it had some direct interplay in some things that are going on in our world right now that we need to be attuned to. And if we failed to be attuned to that, we could end up in bad places in society. And so I created the world. I was as faithful to the world as I could possibly be. And then I used that world to tell us point, to tell a story, and hopefully to get some people thinking and changing. Now, if you are interested in this book, Synaptergy, you can grab it anywhere you can find books to order online. We have print books, ebooks, and audiobooks available. So with that, we'll wrap this video up here. Hopefully those tips helped you to get your writing done right.